Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Rotation. My name is Ashley, aka MiDNiTE, your host with the most. As always, I'm here with IKON at IKON Nation YT, breaking it down every day on his YouTube channel. Great stuff. And then we got Kingdom Soldier, the OG. I mean, is it weird if I'm an OG, call you an OG, or does it make sense because we're both OGs, right? Does that make sense?
We're both OGs. We've been around for
Yeah.
a hot minute. Yeah.
We've been watching way too much competitive Call of Duty for way too long, and it never gets old. That's what's crazy. I forget. I think I know this somewhere in my brain, but when did you start watching competitive Call of Duty?
Like before there was an Optic Team House. Like I'm an OG too,
Okay.
but I just didn't make content like you guys did.
Right. Okay. So like 2012-ish, Black Ops 1-ish, Modern Warfare 3-ish.
Yeah,
Wait,
long
Well, you
time.
competed,
Modern Warfare 3
right,
before
Icon?
Black-
I
What?
did. I went.
You
Yeah,
dropping bombs
I went.
on land?
I did go to a couple like MLG Columbus back in like the COD Ghost AW time.
Nice.
There was actually, the last tournament I was in, we actually got eliminated by Killa's roster. So that's always something I remember. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Dang. Back when Killa was Killa. The undeniable
Yep.
sloss boss. All right, anyways, leave a comment, guys. Welcome to the podcast. Leave a comment down in the comment section or in the chat. When did you start watching competitive Call of Duty? Have you been watching for a bunch of Call of Duties now? You're into it. You're deep in the know. Did you just start when CDL came out? Did you just start when Minnesota got a team? That was really hype. Obviously, I'm from Minnesota, lifelong Minnesotan. Love it here. Love the Vikings. And then, I find out that the Vikings are, their ownership group is purchasing a CDL slot in Minnesota. I said, wow, I got to be a part of that. Anyway, that's how we got here. And we're here to talk CDL. I mean, we can talk about the major, how the matches went, how Roker looked, and maybe we'll just skip over that part and we'll break it down. And, obviously we already have another home series coming up next week, the Toronto home series. So we don't get much of a break, really. We went from, the start of the stage, the weird power outage in Texas delaying things, Super Week happening. And then the next week, you have majors going from Wednesday to Sunday. I watched so much freaking Call of Duty, and I'm still not sick of it. As we said, we'd never get sick of it. So, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the major. Let's do some quick takes, and then we can kind of break down some of the more, prominent like moments, players or teams. We'll go Kingdom first. I usually go Icon first, but I want to change the rotation today. We'll go Kingdom first. What were your hot takes from the major? Who surprised you? Who did what you thought they would do? What were your thoughts?
The major was awesome. First of all, that's my hottest take. The major was it delivered from start to finish. Optic versus Dallas was one of the best matches of the entire year. I've heard pro players. I think I saw a video where Octane was like, it's going to be hard to top that. When you go with those two teams going round 11, game 5, and the way that Dallas won with Hook with his little lucky sneak and missing Envoy. I mean, it was just, and there's so many Sky's 11-0 start on Raid,
crazy.
Hardpoint. There was just Big Wake being Big Wake. There was just so much about this event that was great. Lag showing up. They broke everybody's bracket from day one. Guess what? Haha, that's what you thought. New York getting the revenge 3-0 after getting 3-0'd by Optic, going on the lower bracket run, and then getting
nuts.
that 3-0 over Optic was freaking off the charts bananas. And then, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, but FaZe proving we're unstoppable. We are leaps and bounds beyond everybody else. Have fun trying to catch up. I heard a little bit of Zuma's little after party show he does, the Flank or whatever podcast, and Alec jumped on there towards the end. And he just has this coolness and calmness in his voice. He's like, hey, how's it going? Yeah. It's he was saying that it was weird because after they won that, it's different than when there's a LAN and you can huddle up and hug each other and take pictures and get interviewed by all these different media outlets. He was like, no, it's it was just over. And then we were like, hey, when are our next scrims? And they just won. I mean, he did get $50,000 richer. So, He said he's going to Disneyland with it. But FaZe just, I'm happy that Dallas did take a couple maps off of them, because, I mean, it would have been great if they just swept all of the competition. It didn't drop a single map. And then I'll tell you a crazy statistic that I learned on the tail end of this. And I don't know if IKON mentioned it. I was watching some video. I think they said that Alec, aBeZy, and Simp, and you have to go back to when they were on eUnited, have won 17 series in a row. As a trio.
Wait, what? Say that again? What? Say that again? Hold on.
Varsities,
let me digest that.
Simp, and aBeZy.
Okay.
As a trio, whenever they've teamed, because remember, Alec went on the Huntsman, and so he can't count that time. But when they've played together, they have won 17 series in a row.
Minus the Florida one that didn't count, right?
Yes, exactly.
That one was
minus
a scrim,
the
whatever.
One that didn't count.
People
call it an exhibition match, or
it was an exhibition.
Right. Which I think, to be honest with you, is bananas.
Yeah, that was a pretty crazy upset. But no, even with that, like, because it really, I don't feel like most of the teams were really plugged in on that kickoff weekend. It was a glorified scrim, so it's cool to see. When it's on the line, that trio is terrifying, right? Like, that's such a cool stat. They are. I mean, we knew it when Arcitys went over from Huntsman last year, now Optic, over to FaZe. Like, we knew that that's a scary damn roster, and they proved it this weekend. Or, I mean, I guess all the last month of competition, they really proved it. Just like, they are dominant. It's really cool to see. Right. So, IKON, what did you think? What were your kind of major takes? Who, like, individually surprised you? What teams, let you down, let you up? Where were you at? Just kind of enjoying it, breaking it down. What did you notice? IKON, you there?
We're back.
We're back.
I think we're here. Back. I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. To pick up where you left off, I'll say the first thing is that I thought that the tournament was actually more predictable than I thought it was going to be. Outside of, like, Minnesota losing, I definitely thought Minnesota was going to win that series. I thought that they would probably make I thought that they would make a pretty strong run through the elimination bracket. Of course, Optic going out, but I felt like you were going to have Atlanta in the final. I think we all picked last week that Atlanta was going to win. I kind of figured that we'd see Dallas or Chicago there. So maybe the only thing that was majorly unpredictable was the run that New York went on before, of course, they got 3-0'd by Dallas.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy to watch, especially like after that 3-0 win over Optics, seeing Clay's picture in the post game, and he was just smashing his table and freaking out in classic Clay fashion. So right. I thought overall it was probably more predictable than probably would be in the future. I think a lot of the storylines that come out of this first major is what's going to happen afterwards. Just from like today, the timeline has been crazy based off of the GAs that are happening, and now there's no longer an M4, and we have some attachments that are GA'd off of the AK-74U, and it just seems like the next time we see matches, and by the time the next major rolls around, it just feels like we're going to be playing a completely different game, especially if smokes and snipers come back and search and destroy. I mean, basically what we saw out of this major was kind of as baseline as COD could be, right? It doesn't really, if there's no smokes, it doesn't really make for many flanks and doesn't make for a ton of drama and search and destroy with people hitting the flanks and getting behind the defense. And I just feel like a lot of that is going to be different when we get into matches here in the next week or so. So that's really the biggest thing for me is just, I feel like Atlanta I feel like they were the best team going into the major. I feel like that they're the best team coming out of the major. I don't actually see how, if they're in a final right now, I don't see how anybody beats them, especially the way that the format is with having 4 search and destroys and a best of 9. I just don't know, like, unless you're a really dominant search team, I'm not sure how you end up beating them in a best of 9 when there's 4 search and destroys. Of course, Minnesota with what they've been
I
doing
would
in
love to
search
see
for
that.
their.
Oh man, if Rocker could get in a best of 9 with FaZe and watching those S&D duels,
Yep.
that would be insane. I hope that can happen. But anyway, sorry, I got excited when you said that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's what it would take, right? And even with that in mind, like Dallas is a really good search team. Like going back to last year and what we've seen this year, it's not like they're like the 10th best team in search. Like they're tremendous at search, and they didn't even really seem like they belonged in the same match as them. So that's kind of the biggest takeaways, is that I just don't see how Atlanta loses going forward. Like maybe somebody could get hot if it's in like winners round 2, and then somebody beats them before they get to the final. But if it goes to the final, and also the other thing when it comes to the final is I thought it was fairly odd that the team that came from the winners bracket didn't have any advantage. Like there was no 2 best of 5s. I like the best of 9, but it's interesting that like last year during champs when there was a best of 9, yeah, the team that came out of winners had a 1-0 lead, and this time it was basically straight up. So if you lose a match and fall to the elimination bracket and go on an elimination bracket 1 and make it to the grand final, once you get there, outside of like potential vetoes and whatnot, you basically start at 0-0, and it's just the first of 5. So there's a lot of takeaways, but I feel like a lot of what I've focused on is not necessarily too much what happened during the tournament, because outside of like what we mentioned, like New York and Minnesota falling and stuff like that, like it kind of went how I thought it would. But a lot is like what's happened afterwards and how's it going to change moving forward as we approach the second major.
Dude,
Can I
it's
touch
pretty
on the
crazy.
best of 9 thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to share Crowder. Crowder was on that same flank show and with Zuma, and that was brought up. And I think his point is interesting. I'd be interested to see what people would say in the chat or on the YouTube video hearing it. But he mentioned that he's like, yes, there should be that 1-0, like because when you have a 1-0 lead, you win those first 2, and you're like sitting pretty. You're like, well, we're up 3-0. Like this is chalked. Like they're not going to beat us 5 times before we get 2 maps, And so, because I think that was an advantage that Dallas had last year. But he also said, because they could have went up 3 and then lost 4-5. Like, and the question was asked to Crowder, like, how would you have felt? And he was like, well, we still would have lost 5 maps. Like, at the end of the day, you have to admit the fact that if you let somebody beat you 5 times, even if it started 0-0, they kind of deserve to be the victors. They deserve to be the champions, And so I think, the CDL said they did it for the viewer's experience, because someone coming in new wouldn't understand that why is there a 1-0 lead? I don't understand how that team won less maps. And I'll say that once I got into the match, I did want it to be more competitive, so I was happy that Dallas picked up a couple maps. But once I got into the match, I wasn't focused at all on them not having a 1-0 lead. Now, if Dallas would have went up 3-0, everybody would have just been talking about how FaZe should have a lead. FaZe should have a lead. Even if they would have lost 5-2, people would have been like, well, they should have had 1 free map. I think it's an interesting argument. I'm kind of wondering what some of our viewers would say about it, just because it is. I get Crowder's point. Like, if you lose 5 maps, you lose 5 maps, and you should not be the person that wins. But should you get an advantage going into, because you only played 2, right? They played twice, and then were able to win this major in their third match. And so it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about it, Ashley?
Man, I think so. Listen, I'm glad they didn't do the 1-0 map count. I think that's a little lame. Like, if you fight, especially for how long some of these type teams have to fight back through the losers bracket, that's really impressive in all those elimination matches, especially in a tournament. There's so many of them back to back. And previously they did you have to win 2 best of 5. So instead of 1 big best of 9, you had to win 3 maps out of 5 and then 3 maps out of 5. So you could kind of like afford to swing a little bit, whereas in the best of 9, it's much harder to do that. And so I feel like I really didn't like that, like double elim, like you need to win 2 best of 5s. I really didn't like that. I thought that like kind of ended things prematurely. I don't think that the team who is in the winners bracket already, or the upper bracket, whatever, should get a 1-0 lead. And I do, like, I'd have to double check on like the rules and what actually happened and how many maps were for or against, but it sounds like the front almost half or side of the best of 9 were FaZe map picks, right? So that's why you saw them come out and just smoke Dallas, right? Because those were their picks. And Dallas's picks, I mean, you saw when they came in, they started to win. But
killed them on the hard mode.
But too, when you think about it, like if the best of 9, I mean, how many maps are we even playing? You're just kind of playing all the maps at that point. And I really like that as well. I really like that you have to, like, the map pool is already so small, and we're doing vetoes because, you know, strengths and weaknesses, but no, play the full finals, play all the maps that we can, or, you know, as many as we can, and make sure they're competitive. Please add standoff and express. Thank you, Treyarch. But, you know, I think I like the best of 9 format. I think Crowders are right. If you lose 5 maps in the finals, it doesn't matter if you only won 2 matches and you were sitting pretty. You need to show up on the day, and I think it just adds more weight to the finals. I'd really rather not watch a team try to win 2 best of 5s. It's just a struggle for me. I like that. I like it's just adds more stakes to the finals, in my opinion. So I don't know. I'd love to hear what the viewers think as well. They'll comment or put in the YouTube chat. Would love to know your thoughts, or comment. I know we're on Spotify, Google, wherever you're listening to us. Make sure to comment your thoughts on the finals format. But overall, I mean, let's just like kind of round up the stage. I thought that even with the weirdness of the power outages and then Super Week, I really enjoy this format. You know, it's hard for CDL to get things perfect. It's hard. We're all in remote production and remote playing LAN. Like, we're not on LAN, we're doing everything's online, so that's always tough. And I think, you know, given those circumstances, the league's done a pretty good job of adjusting and trying to make this as competitive of an esports as you can. And I mean, I was really amped up by that, and I was really excited to just watch all of the action. I mean, that New York going so streaky as they did when they beat us, like when they beat ROKKR, I was flabbergasted. I don't know why I would be surprised with a Clayster-led team doing what they did, but that was just so impressive to me. And I think Kingdom, you called it, right? Like you said, like or was it IKON? I get you guys mixed up for some reason. Like you said, Clayster is like that dude, and you were right. Yeah. He's that dude right now, and I just think that's so impressive that you. I'll ask you guys this. What did you guys think of Clay seemingly frustrated in a post-game interview, basically saying kind of like down on his teammates or down on his situation, saying that he's the most experienced and it's frustrating and he's losing full composure, like that type of thing? What did you guys think of that? I thought it was really like genuine moment and very genuine honesty, but you never see that type of thing in the post-game interview. So what did you guys make of it? I kind of let you go first.
I just feel like that's what you get with Clay, right? And that's part of what makes him so good, is that when you put him on an interview, whether it's, you know, from remote or on LAN or whatever, he's going to tell you how he feels, and he's going to tell you like kind of what his emotions are and what he's going through. And that's what makes him not only the player that he is, but it makes him such a great player, is that he's not afraid to, you know, if they're in scrims or even if they're in a big match, he's not afraid to call somebody out and tell them what they should be doing differently. And that's, I mean, you can see it. It's just throughout his entire career, he's taking these teams where you think like, all right, well, there's 2 rookies here on MiDNiTE. They're probably chalked. We'll see what happens. And then they come out and they do what they do. And then last year they have 2 new rookies on Dallas, and they come out and nobody expects him to win a championship. It's just, I don't know. I feel like with him, that's the sort of thing that you're going to get all the time. And that's what makes him the person he is and the player that he is.
I watched New York Scrim today, which was amazing that somebody else was streaming the scrims. And yes, Clayster was streaming scrims. And this dude was like, what are we doing? He's like, why aren't we getting any kills? The map is over. He pulls up the mini map, and then he's literally coaching the team. Like he pulls up the mini map, and he's and the VOD of the game they just played, and he's rewinding it, and then he's like, "Seam, what were you doing? Why did you back up? Why did you jump in green window? Like, why would you make that decision? That's not what we do in practice. Why are we doing it in a scrim?" Like, he was Clayster. He was, and I'm like, I've never had real insight into listen-ins unless it's in a match. So getting to listen to how they talk, and they were playing against, I think, Paris, getting to listen to them talk to each other and I could hear genuine frustration in Clayster, but here's what I heard on the other side. Mac, why are you doing that? Like, what did you do that map? My bad, man. I was supposed to do this. I just thought that it was best if you know what I'm saying, it was my mistake. Like, what I'm hearing is yes, he's being rough and pounding the pavement, all that kind of stuff. But their winning is because these guys are responding to it. They're hungry enough, they're young enough to where they, Krim has always had that same challenge. That's why Dallas is what they are. Like, Krim has had that same challenge in his career when he gets with a Scump and a Formal, and like, they don't want to listen to him. They're like, dude, we've won championships. Yeah, you're the winningest player, blah, 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 but don't talk to me like that. You know what I'm saying? These guys are like, this is Krim 6. He's the winningest player in Call of Duty history. This is Clayster. He has 3 rings. He got dropped and came back and won another championship. And we're actually winning. Maybe we should listen to him. Like, Clayster deserves a little bit of respect. He leads differently than I would lead, in terms of being a little aggravated. But But Clayster is also the person that pounds the crap out of his desk and screaming at his teammates, "We're the best in the game," when they 3-0 Optic, And so, and I think some of his trash talk, like the stuff with Dashy when he was on the show with Zuma, he was talking about how Dashy threw some shade at him and he didn't know it was genuine. He thought they were just playing around like he does with everybody else. And he said since he threw out that kind of quote where he quoted Dashy on Twitter and said, because Dashy said, "Good luck without Zio," and, "Good luck without the Tiny Terrors." And he's like, "Well, look what I did with my new teammates," and he 3-0'd Optic. And Dashy hasn't said anything, which is probably smart. But he hit up Seth, and Seth's like, "Man, I get it. You're cool. We're good." And he also said the same thing to Envoy. And so I think Clayster is just taking an advantage of an opportunity to lead at as well as he can. And his best way to lead right now is to look at these younger players. And if they're going to give him the opportunity to be himself, why not? If they're having results like getting top 3, no one would have picked New York to get top 3 in this tournament. Like, if that's the results, well then, hey, more power to you, Clayster.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There's one thing that I love is when people are unapologetically themselves. And with Clayster, you're getting Clayster. That is who he is. You're not getting like the PR media trained, like, well, it was really good games, Dallas. And no, you're going to get genuine emotion, reaction, good, bad, high, low. I love that. He's throwing medals on stage. He's hoisted trophies the next year. He's just everything that I love about competitive Call of Duty resides in Clayster. And I think you're right. I think he's shown that he is a capable leader in multiple different lineups, championship lineups at that. I mean, world championship lineups, not just, we won a MLG Columbus real quick. Like, no, you've won champs multiple times with multiple different new players. I think it speaks a ton to his ability to teach, to lead. And yeah, I agree. I probably wouldn't scream at my teammates or get as animated. And, like, I thought it was interesting when CDL showed and like his voice and his video feed from a loss and how tough that was to watch. Like, I get it though. He's genuine. He's Clayster, man. I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I wish more people were like that. And I do think there is a level of respect that needs to be earned and given, right? I don't think if every COD pro tried that approach, you're not going to have a lot of success. But I think based on his experience, who he is, and how much knowledge he brings to a team, it just, I don't know, makes sense to me. So anyway, that was our homage to Clayster. Maybe he'll see us gassing him up super hard and he'll come on the show because I would love to talk to him. Awesome. That would be sweet. He's a good guy. So let's talk a little bit about like what the hell happens now. There was some crazy surprises with Stage 1 in general. I think if you look at the standings, if we're able to pull those up, kind of where the lay of the land is now that we are through Stage 1, the CDL points standings, you've got the usual suspects in the top 3. You got Subliners, LA Thieves, Gorillas, big surprise there. Big surprise. You've got, shout out Shannon, the producer, by the way, who made this overlay. This looks cool. Shout out to that. Then you got ROKKR at 7th. I don't know how that happened. We won't talk about that yet. You got top 8 is Florida Ultra Legion, and at the bottom, Surge and Royal Ravens. Wow. Royal Ravens didn't even win a match. That's tough scenes. But yeah, so this is like the lay of the land after Stage 1. Fellas, what are your thoughts? Is this exactly what we thought would happen? Is it what's the biggest like surprise, I guess, for you guys? Is it New York? Where are you guys at? I'll let IKON go first.
I think first of all, biggest thing is actually we were talking about it a little bit in the pre-show. Just the fact that winning a tournament gives you so many CDL points. Like if you look at Atlanta, they got so many CDL points just from winning that tournament that right now, if you're like Seattle or London or somebody that's down towards the bottom, it seems like you have such a mountain to climb in front of you. Yeah, like how are you possibly gonna get back to having 125 CDL points? I mean, you would have to absolutely pop off, win every single one of your games throughout the 3 weeks, and then have just a nasty, placing in the second major. So that's kind of the thing. But as we also mentioned, is I kind of feel like that's how it should be, right? Because if you win 2 majors or you play really good in 3 majors, like you shouldn't miss champs just because you underperformed in 2 others. So I even though just looking at it right now after the first major, it seems like there's such a discrepancy between some of these teams, but ultimately I kind of get it. Like if you get through that entire tournament, and that's something else from the first major that think about last year and how long it took us to see a matchup between Chicago and Atlanta. It took like all the way till almost the end of the year. And now we're through the first major, and we saw Optic play New York twice, and they played Dallas, and we saw Dallas versus Atlanta twice, and we saw Optic versus LA Thieves. And like, just think about the matchups that we saw after one stage. So those that are on the top, there's no denying that they deserve to be there, right? I mean, it's not like they got lucky and the groups were in their favor or whatever. Like they had to grind and work for what they got. So that's something there. The other thing that I wanted to point out is just basically looking at where LAG is at, Los Angeles Guerrillas. They're in 6th right now. And really the only reason why they're ahead of Minnesota is because they did better in group play and they placed just a little bit further ahead in the major, which earned them an extra 10 points. So it just kind of
better in group play though. They got 20 points in group play. The ROKKR got 30. So it was just the major. They got 30 and the ROKKR got 10.
You're right. So it was from the groups. They actually just got luckier with how the groups finished, that they were able to start in winners bracket. Right. Yeah, they were able to start in winners bracket. And then even though, you got to give them credit, they came out and beat LA Thieves. I don't think anybody anywhere picked them to win that matchup. But after that, like, I know it's a storyline like, wow, look at LAG. They're surprising people. And they had a good match against LA Thieves. But after that, they got smoked by Atlanta, and they didn't really look good against New York in that elimination match. So, I don't know, just basically that's kind of the other thing that I take away from this when I'm looking at standings is that, yeah, like if you do well and you place first, second, or third, you're going to get a ton of CDL points and you're going to look great in the standings. But also the groups have a lot to do with it because you can just get lucky and have a group that's not quite as dominant as the one that Minnesota had. And now all of a sudden you place higher in the major, which gives you extra points. And now you're in 6th instead of 7th or 8th. And I mean, if you think about it, Minnesota's got 40 CDL points. And I know it's super early. We still have 4 more majors to go and a whole slew of regular season matches. But if you think about it, Minnesota's like 10 points away from not qualifying for a potential champs. And it's just like, I know it's super early right now, but just thinking about like how they could go 3-2 in groups and just not have a good opening match in a major. And that's the position that they're in. So I'm sure it'll change over the next 3-4 majors in the next 3 or 4 months, but it's just kind of some early takeaways based off what I see here from the points.
And I think that comes down to what you always talk about, IKON, like on your own channel and stuff like that, and even on here. It's like you have to beat the teams that you should beat in this league, and technically, in my opinion, like you've said about specifically Minnesota and Florida, they should beat Toronto, Paris, Seattle, London. And losing to the Ultra in that opening match is kind of what sent Minnesota out of the tournament. And if they would have won that, then we'd be telling a whole different story. Who knows how far they would have went in the lower bracket, And so I know that wasn't a happy moment for the Minnesota family. But I think if they win that match, they would have ran into New York, and it would have been it would have been a different story for them. They would have, and maybe they'd be where the Thieves are. Maybe they'd be up in, 5th or 6th, because they did get 30 points. They did get 3 wins during the stage before the major, and they just didn't combine more than those 10 points with that 30. And so that's, it just was unfortunate the way they went out. But I think Minnesota's going to turn it around. I think they're going to work on that hard point game. And if they can even just, because there's 2 hard points per 5 maps, if they can just take one of them per match, they become a very hard team to beat because they already stand up pretty well in the other game modes. Go ahead. Sorry, Ashley.
Yeah. No, sorry. I thought you were finished. I didn't want to cut you off, though. I definitely agree. I mean, obviously, yeah, dude, it sucks, bro, when you have such high expectations for yourselves, the fans, everyone's so excited, and you get to stage 1. You actually do go positive in your group. You go 3-2, and because of a very, very slick 3-0 from Clayster and Co. on New York, we end up losing the tiebreaker there and go into the lower bracket. But still, I mean, if I'm being honest, you lose to Toronto, who I don't think looked particularly good. It's very clear that there's still some improvements that need to be made by the ROKKR boys.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, I was talking to Jake. He's the assistant coach here with ROKKR. I was talking to Jake yesterday, and I was like, listen, man, remember last year how ROKKR started so hot and everyone was so surprised, and we're blowing people's hair back at LANs. We're getting to the finals versus Dallas on LAN. Like, it was awesome. But
Yeah.
we nosedove in the latter half of the season. I would far rather start slow and finish hot rather than do what we did last year. So if we are going to lose, hopefully we don't keep losing. But if we are going to, you want to do it now. You want to learn. And I do think, like, I talk a lot about the resolve of the players that we have on the ROKKR roster, but truly, these guys are grinders. They're built differently. I think that they don't take this stuff lightly. Obviously, they're very competitive, but they're also very talented. Like, they are back in the mother freaking lab, dude, and they're getting ready for the Toronto home series. And I think, yes, when you look at the standings here, we're in 7th with 40 points. That's tough, especially when you look at number 1 has 125, second place has 100. You're like, oh my gosh, dude, we're like forever behind. But there is still a lot of Call of Duty left to be played. But in order to get up into that upper, that top 6, top 4, even top 3 eventually, you got to play better. And I think they will. I think they're going to improve hardpoint. I'll be interested to know, like, your guys' thoughts. Obviously, there's a big meta shift happening. I think, you guys made a really good point at the beginning. Like, the craziest part of this isn't really like, like back in the old days, after different Call of Duty lands, there would be like a roster mania after every event.
Oh,
well, now the rosters are locked and there's contracts. It's way more complicated than that. But instead, we're having a meta mania. We're having like things are getting like GA'd and stuff by the play. Dude, I will make a Metamania t-shirt. Let's go. But you're seeing like all these changes to the meta happening, and some of these are based on, players kind of agreeing to not use certain attachments or weapons. I'm not sure how that all works at the CDL level and what's going to happen there, but I will say it seems like the players are deciding what they want to play with. And so this is actually a really big meta shift now, because they've decided to not use the M4, or they've only decided to not use certain attachments on the M4? What's the
XM4 is gone. Like,
it's gone. They said no, GA. Peace out. Yeah. It's too good.
Yeah. Rest in peace. It's out.
And
they took 2 attachments off of the AK-74U. They took 2 attachments off of it that you can't use anymore. And it's a big beef, and it's like, the scrim I was watching, what is it called, IKON? The QBZ is like the new gun they're trying to use. Is that what it's called?
QBZ, yeah.
QBZ.
That gun for it doesn't matter.
That's what everybody's trying to play with now. Attach put out a video on it earlier, and he was talking about, well, this is the new meta, and then he goes, keep your notifications on, because I'm sure it'll be a different gun tomorrow. Because honestly, it is metamania. You described it accurately. It is. And here's my question, and what I'm wondering. Are we nerfing guns, or are we trying to nerf players and teams? Because I know that these pro players are smart. Like, these dudes are, they're up here, they're like, well, we got to give everybody else a chance against FaZe, so what do we got to do? Like Abizi was not happy with the AK-74U changes, like, and having to remove 2 attachments from that gun. But the players make a good point. When you can put 10 attachments on something, you can make almost every gun be invincible, you know. And so their way of nerfing is like, we just want, but to have a 3-gun meta in competitive Call of Duty at this stage and at this level of play, I don't know if it's possible, because your flex, if they start using that QBZ and they're using it well, then your AR player, that's going to be the main, and then it'll just be the QBZ, and nobody's going to use a Krig. It'll be the QBZ and the AK-74U. And I don't think they're going to be able to GA things to a point where they're going to use 3 guns. I don't see it happening. And I think that I'm going to say this because it's weird. I'm a Black Ops 1 head. That's when I've watched Call of Duty and competitive Call of Duty for longer than that, but that's when I fell in love with it. And everyone was using the same guns. Like, it was like, okay, how many FAMASas am I about to see on the map right now? Oh, 4 of them?
8.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
It's always
4 on each
an
team.
insane amount.
And that it's like, and so if we're at a point now where there's only 2 guns, but these pro players are using them well, I'm like, well, look, as long as it's fair and equal, and that's just me as a viewer. That's all I'm going to say. I know pro players will crucify me for saying this, but I think it is metamania. I think they're trying to make the game more competitive, but I wonder what teams are going to be impacted by that. You may see some of these teams that made runs like not have an opportunity. Like you said, you asked Jake, like, hey, so is this better for us or worse for us? You know, and so I think it's interesting. I don't know how they make these decisions. I heard that the chats are bananas. And here's the last thing I'll mention. In the EU, I think in the EU Challengers, they've already GA'd the QBZ.
They GA'd the whole game over there.
Basically, it's going to be knives only. Like,
that is what it's going to get to. I don't know, man. The GAs are a little out of control. I've always been for the players having the autonomy to decide, figure it out. Like, what is the truest competitive form of this game? I would love to see more interaction between the players and the developers to come to that conclusion. But, I mean, I just don't think that's entirely possible, because you do have so much shiftiness or back and forth, or we didn't really like when this team used 4 XM4, so we got to change that, and we don't want to change that by all using the same thing, so we're just going to try to ban it, but then we're all going to use the same thing anyway. And so I wish, it's hard to follow. I saw someone in the chat, King Swifty in the chat, said, you know, it's too hard for casuals to stay up to date, and like, I'm not a casual, and I'm a little lost this week looking at the Twitter timeline. So I don't know. I do think that GAs are interesting. I do think that there are some instances where they help the game become more competitive, but then I think we're getting a little lost in the sauce right now with how crazy they're going. So I kind of would love to know your thoughts. Like, why do you think the GAs are so out of control right now, and what are your thoughts on them?
Well, first of all, I do think that the XM4 was a little bit too powerful. It had a very Maddox-ish vibe to it from Black Ops 4, which was kind of like the jack of all trades gun from 2 years ago. So I understand, because there were ranges where you have a 74U, you have an XM4 up close. Those gun battles should all the time go to the 74U, and a lot of them just weren't. So I do think that it was probably too powerful. The issue is that, where do you go now if you're trying to use an AR? Because the Krig is too weak, QBZ is just kind of funky and has a weird recoil pattern, and that doesn't matter for pros per se, but it's not the prototypical main AR gun. So the biggest issue is, you know, like, where do you go from here? And then which teams are going to be affected by this? Because I'll tell you, you put a 3rd SMG in Celium's hands, good freaking luck. I mean, those guys are already so good, and that's why Celium is so dangerous as a flex, because he's an insane AR, and he's just as insane with an SMG in his hands. Whereas, like, Dashy, this meta was perfect for Optic and Dashy, because the XM4 was very like the Maddox, so it allowed him to play fast, and he still has an AR. And when it comes to Dashy, like even Lando said last week, like, he's got just pure aiming gun skill. Like, it doesn't get any better. So when you allow him to play fast with a gun like the XM4, like, he's nasty. And that's why he's at the top of basically every statistical category. But now if you have a 3 SMG meta, and we kind of saw what happened last year when he was forced to use an MP5 for OGLA, it just that he's not the same sort of player.
Nope.
And I just think, like, Dallas will be fine. You put an SMG in Illy's hands, the dude is still nasty. Like, I feel like those two teams really aren't affected. And we were talking about it a little beforehand, and it's kind of the same for Minnesota. I'm interested to see, like, if you put an AK-74U all the time in Major Maniac's hands, like, how is that going to compare when you have attached Priesta and Major Maniac with SMGs against Simpa, BZ, and Celium? Like, it just seems like, I don't know. It's yet
Will
to
it
be
speed
seen.
him up, though? Do you think? Because that's one of the things people have said is that he's a bit slower. Like, would it speed him up, and help the team?
Well, it could, but even watching Minnesota play, like, especially in Search and Destroy, he's that guy, like on Miami Search and Destroy, that's hitting right down the middle of the map on defense, and he's the dude that's getting behind the offense where you don't expect him to be. Like, that's the biggest thing that I've seen so far from him, is that you just like, the thing is that you expect him to play slower, and then you see these Search and Destroy rounds, and he is hitting mid-map super fast, and he's getting in those Pristini, Abizi, Zuma type positions that you don't expect people to be in. So I don't know. It'll be interesting, but I think, like, Florida, for example, like, Awakening is insane with an AR in his hands. What's going to happen when he has to have an SMG? I just feel like you have these teams, like, I think Florida and Minnesota and LA Thieves and New York, I think they're close to competing with Dallas and Atlanta. But if you change it to a 3 SMG meta, I have no idea how you beat Atlanta if that's the case. I think a lot of other teams are vulnerable, but that's the one that really, like, stands out. And I don't know what you would do from that point.
So what you're saying is Atlanta FaZe are already terrifying, but now with a potential 3 sub meta, they are just doubling down on that terror, the tiny terrors, if you will. I agree. I think, like, if we try to, like, let's focus Minnesota for a second, then we'll talk about, like, next week and kind of our expectations and power rankings. But obviously not the showing you want to see from ROKKR. It sucks to put out a stinker in the first event because everyone's so hype. I just got my merch, baby, shop.rokker.gg. I'm all hype. I got my jersey. And then you come out and it doesn't go your way. But I think, I think Major Maniac is a much faster player than people think he can be, because he was kind of hamstrung into that main AR role on Atlanta FaZe last year. But he proved on Gen G that he's a great flex back in Black Ops 4. And I think he's going to prove this year again, if we do go into this new meta where it's 3 subs and 1 AR, there's just a lot more switching and less M4s or XM4s, whatever. You're going to see him elevate to his full potential and see, like, really, like, who is Major Maniac. He's not a sentry turret like he had to be last year. That just wasn't his game. And so I think it's hard for me to say because I don't watch the guys practice all the time. I'm not super plugged into, like, what's wrong or what's good, what's bad, and all that stuff. Yeah. But I do think that this meta shift, if you're coming out and you put a stinker out your first event and then there's a massive meta change, you got to think that helps a little bit, because clearly something wasn't working for you in that other meta. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think ROKKR's, like, first event here, is this an anomaly? What needs to happen for them to improve? Is it just, get better at hardpoint individually? Like, what did you guys think? And you could be honest. Like, here, I'm all decked out of ROKKR gear. I'm going to say great things about the guys all the time. But I would love to know you guys' honest feedback on the team and their performance. Kingdom, we can start with you.
Do you know, IKON, off the top of your head, what their hardpoint record is overall?
Like
not good.
Something.
They're 12th in the league.
It might be like 1-9 or 1-10 or something. Is it that crazy?
We did win 1, so that was cool.
So, I mean, honestly, it's hard to say anything other than improving hardpoint. Like, I mean, you don't want to focus on one game mode, because we've seen this with Optic teams in the past. They're great at, respawns, and then they focus on search, and then they get worse in respawns because of their focus on search. Like, but you guys, like, Minnesota has an incredible coaching staff that I know is trying to figure out what the heck is going on in hardpoint. And in the same way that Minnesota are geniuses when it comes to mid-game, mid-round decisions and search, hardpoint in this game requires some of those decisions. Like when Crowder was talking about how they got smacked around, I think it might have been checkmate by Dallas in the grand final on hardpoint, and they were just getting smoked, and it just got worse and worse. He was like, well, when you get put on your heels, it then becomes, oh yeah, you guys did win one against, was it against Dallas that you won the one hardpoint?
We won 2 hardpoint maps, according to the chat.
Oh, okay.
I think we won because we 3-0'd a team, and then I think we snuck one on Dallas. Yeah, so I forget who we 3-0'd, but we
2 and 7.
We won 2 hardpoints out of
2 and 7. That's not too bad. That's, I mean, it's bad, but it's not like
it's pretty bad.
It's not like 2 and 13. Yeah, I know. I'm being nice, but so I would say that if when you get into those times when, and maybe what it is I don't know the team, so I'm just speaking totally out of my butt. But it may be that they need to determine who's going to in-game lead in those difficult moments. You know what? The biggest mistake that FaZe made last year was their communication. Coming into this year, the reason they lost to Florida was their communication. It's still something they're working on. And Alec has had to like take over and be like, hey guys, calm down, stay focused, we're going to be fine, do your rotations. Someone on Minnesota, when they're down 70 points in a hard point, that's one of those breaking moments. You can't get down 100, like, because then it seems you get those apocalyptic thoughts in your head where it's like, we can't win this map. And then you play different, and you start ego channeling, and it's chalked, and nothing is ever chalked. Like, this is what Clayster said when they reverse swept, and when they got reverse swept, you know, Dallas was like, nothing is ever chalked. And so nothing is ever chalked. No map is ever chalked. And so I would say, because even if you're just working on fundamentals, but you still lose the map, I would say figuring out how to learn from those losses in a way that hopefully turns into some wins. I mean, IKON can speak better than I can because he's a former player. I mean, you are too, but it's like in the hardpoint in this game specifically, sure, if you have Skies go 11-0 at the beginning of the map, you're probably going to win. But I don't know what it is. I don't know if you have to have a great breakout and get the first couple of points, if you got to get the first 2 hard points, if it's like it was in Black Ops 2, where it's all about rotation and holding spawns. On some of these maps, what the heck are the spawns? Like, you know, like on Crossroads, like what? I saw some crazy tweet today, I think from Brian Saint. And so I don't know what it is that they're not doing, but there has to be something. These are professionals, and these guys, their 4 names, they're at the top of their abilities. These are 4 of the best players on the planet. So there is something that's not being done when you have a 2-7 record. That's not an anomaly anymore. It's a consistency. And like I said earlier, if Minnesota, this is not a fluke in my opinion, because if Minnesota can win more hard points and at least move to like a 60 to 70% win percentage, they are a ridiculously dangerous team. They already are. They went 3-2 going into the major. Like, this team is a different team if they win hard points. So that's my opinion on the matter.
A few things here. First of all, I think we have to kind of remember to not overreact here. In their first group, I mean, Minnesota had a nasty group with 4 teams that finished above 500. I mean, when you're looking at their 2-7 overall in hardpoint, 2 of their losses were to LA Thieves right at the beginning of the year when they were like the second best hardpoint team in the game. Their next 2 hardpoint losses were to Dallas. So there's 4 of those 7 losses. Right. And then another of those 7 losses was to New York when they got 3-0'd, when New York looked like, who is this team? Like, they're just coming out of nowhere. And
freaking world beaters, dude.
I can't, right, that's what I'm saying. So it's easy to sit here and think like 2-7, the 12th ranked hardpoint team in the league. Like, but if you throw in a couple matches against like Seattle or Paris or London, or you throw in like some more of those, I think that would be a little bit different. So I think it's easy to overreact, but the teams that they've played are so good in respawn that's to happen. I think it might even be more impressive that they're well, they were the best search team in the game. Now that's Atlanta, but that they're the second best search team in the game, and they did that against that same competition. So
Right.
I don't think it's per se like you have to fix this in your game. I just think that it was a tough schedule. It was the very start of the year. Teams always come out and are better at certain game modes right off the rip than other teams. Like, that's what Optic is literally known for, is that they come out and they're just nasty at respawns, and then eventually everybody starts to figure it out and catch up a little bit. So I think they'll be fine. I mean, if you take a step back and think about it, like, how can they not be? Like, you have Priesta and Attach, who are just two unbelievable SMGs, and you have Accuracy, who has been making tons of plays, even though he didn't have a great series against Toronto. I just think, I don't know, and you can talk about the maps, and like hopefully Crossroads gets a little bit better with the move from P4 being on the left side of the map down to ice, and now you kind of have 2 money hills and 2 contested hills, so that map maybe makes a little bit more sense. But I don't know. I think they're okay. I just think that hopefully, at least kind of how I think, is that by the third major, or like, the end of the second major, I think this will all start to work itself out. I think just right now you're like, Minnesota, like their roster is so talented, and they're 7th in pro points, and they got booted in their first match. Like, what is wrong? I don't think anything's wrong. They still had a 3-2 record in group play. They have a win over Dallas, for crying out loud. I think let's just let it play out, and I think we'll see that they'll start to separate themselves and be in that top 4, top 5, wherever that they belong.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely saw some glimmers of hope in there, right? Like beating Dallas, that was awesome. We did go 3-2 in the groups, and yeah, like if New York doesn't come out like a bat out of hell and beat us 3-0, we're looking at a completely different standing screen here and talking about it differently, right? So I think too, to your point of like if you look at last year, like how ROKKR came out really, really hot, really talented, best, well, I should say best, but very good, like hard point, good domination, whatever that means, and then like struggled in search. And what you'll notice after, because a new COD comes out every year, right? And yeah, hardpoint is a staple game mode of competitive Call of Duty, but each Call of Duty is different, and it has its different nuances, and there's things to learn and absorb. And so what you're going to see is the teams that are really good at respawn, they're going to be really good at it. There's a lot of raw natural talent going on there. Some teams figure it out faster than others. Eventually, all the other teams catch up in those respawn game modes particularly. One thing that I think is kind of just, and this is why it's in every competitive Call of Duty since the beginning of competitive Call of Duty time, Search and Destroy. That is the fundamental game mode. That is a much harder game mode to learn, to pick up. Yeah. Like I mean, listen, I'm crazy, so I'm going to just say this. I think Search and Destroy wins championships. Yes, you do need to be good at respawn. Obviously, you cannot go 2-7 in hardpoint and expect to place near the top of the leaderboard during a major. But if you can tighten up those game modes that are a little easier to eventually latch onto and eventually learn, and you're already good at the most difficult fundamental game mode, like, yes, you're going to obviously need to progress that throughout the year as well, but I think I'd much rather us struggle with a respawn mode that seems like we could pick up rather than Search and Destroy, because Search and Destroy is just, it's one of those game modes where you need the intangibles on your team for that mode. There's not like, oh yeah, just rotate this way when this happens. Like, no, it's so different. And I will say, I mean, we'd probably have to look back on this. This is a MiDNiTE stat, okay? I don't think we should go too heavy into analysis here, but some of, like, yes, we went 2-7 in hardpoint, and I think a couple of them were blowouts, but most of them were close, and we did see a lot of great, like, rotation flipping, spawn flipping, retaking. Like, they showed, like, they get it sometimes, right? Like, they're capable. We all know they're fully capable. And so just tightening that up, I think you're going to see a much more improved ROKKR team come the Toronto home series. So, fellas, let's look ahead. We've got the Toronto home series next week. What the heck is going to happen? I believe the group selection show is happening this week. We'll have a video out with IKON and maybe Kingdom kind of explaining the group and how that all goes and what means what. You know, it's crazy because, like, at the beginning of stage 1, I thought, Group B with Florida and London and, all those teams like Optic, FaZe, like I thought that was the killer group. I thought that was the really hard group. I said London and London wasn't ours, but you know what I mean? Like with that group, to me, Group B looked much more difficult. And then the group ROKKR was in Group A. I was like, oh yeah, like, we'll face New York, whatever. Well, MiDNiTE, it's much different when you see it all play out. So what I'm saying is the group selection clearly matters, and it's very exciting to see kind of where we end up getting placed, because it could indicate, do you make it into the major upper bracket? Where do you start? I don't know. So guys, looking ahead, like it's hard to predict or really like do any matchups because we don't know the groups just yet, which we'll have, like I said, a video coming out talking about that once we know them. But just what are your thoughts going into the next stage? Like, do you think ROKKR and other teams who had a tough time in the first stage are going to bounce back really hard? Do you think some teams who are near the top right now, are they going to decline? Is it too hard to say because now we've had a mania, we've got changes? Like, what's your guys' impressions going into next week? I'll let IKON go first.
So I kind of did a session on it, so I'm a little bit familiar with the groups, but how I think it breaks down at the moment, and I won't go all the way throughout it, but you have Atlanta and Dallas, who were the two teams that were in the final. So Atlanta's in Group A, Dallas is in Group B. Atlanta picks first who's going to go into Group B, which is probably going to be Optic. That would be my guess. At least to me, that's probably still the team that you want to try to avoid if you can. And from there, it's going to be the next two teams are going to be with Atlanta. So for me, is it going to be New York, LA, or Minnesota? I feel like which two teams are going to go onto that side of the bracket. So that's going to determine, like, will Minnesota be in a group with Dallas and Optic, or will Minnesota be in a group with Atlanta and maybe LA Thieves or New York? I mean, it's still going to be either way. I mean, you're going to have, no matter how it shakes out, you're going to have four really tough teams at the top. And that's not even counting the likes of LAG, who did have a good performance in the first major, and Paris was making all kinds of waves before they ran into Florida. And Florida, we haven't even talked about much, but Florida came out, had a little mini run. I mean, they were in search and destroy. Florida was the map 5 search and destroy from knocking out New York. And if that happens, who knows how far they go? Who knows how far Optic ends up going? But when I'm looking ahead at like how teams will perform, or like, will the top team stay on the top or whatever, I think until we start to get a couple days in a row of a meta and what guns are we running and how are we performing with 3 SMGs, or how are we performing with 2 AK-74Us and a QBZ and a Krig, or like, I just think like at the moment, almost what happened in the first major is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but if you're playing a completely different game and now all of a sudden there's smokes and snipers and search and destroy, like how relevant is anything that really happened in search and destroy before you had smokes and snipers? So I feel like a ton of stuff is still changing. I think once you get another 4 weeks under your belt, or maybe once you get into like that third week or that third major area, I think that would probably be where you can start to determine a little bit. But moving forward, let's just see what, for me, I'm going to be standing still, like what happens with the meta, and how is it going to affect some of these middle of the pack teams like Minnesota and LA Thieves and New York, and will Toronto make a run, or Florida? Like, who's impacted the most by a potential meta change, and how do they go into the groups from there?
I think that the top 5 teams are fairly accurate right now. FaZe, Dallas, Chicago, the Subliners, and the Thieves. I think if you're the other teams, those are the teams you need to beat to land in the top 3 in your group. No matter what group you land in, you got to get a W against those teams. And I'm just going to say it for what it's worth. Those top 2 teams are definitely the top 2 teams. I know that everybody's been scared of Optic, but Optic had a lot of chances in this event to go farther than they did. And they just didn't, it just didn't. The matches did not turn out going their way. Yes, they got to game 5, round 11 with Dallas, but then they got 3-0'd by New York. Like, they beat the Thieves and were like on a high, and they did this thing where you just, for some reason, think the subliners aren't as good as LA Thieves, so we'll beat them. And then they just got punched in the mouth and they didn't know how to respond to it. And so in my opinion, if you're the Atlanta FaZe and the Dallas Empire, if I'm their organization, I'm going into the next group saying my team will be in the top 3 in the group, unless you can't change the meta enough, and we've already talked about it, to change those 2 teams. No matter how you adjust the meta, those teams their rosters are staffed in a way where they'll be fine. So if you're Minnesota, if you're the Gorillas, if you're the Florida Mutineers, even if you're the Toronto Ultra, and I'll throw in Paris, you're going to have to beat each other. And because Minnesota saw what happens when the head-to-head doesn't go your way. You have to beat each other, and you have to get a win off of one of those top 5 teams. Like, wherever you land, you got to beat. When you go up against the Thieves, if you're Toronto, you got to steal a W. Like, you just got to figure it out. You got to steal. Like, Minnesota is going to have to beat the Subliners, or beat Chicago, or beat Dallas, or beat FaZe, or beat the LA Thieves. And that's where you get to feel safe. Once you get one of those victories that you kind of steal. Seattle and London, if I'm their organizational owners, and I have no shade, I'm just going to say this for what it's worth, I'm anticipating that we might be in the lower bracket. Because the other teams above us have just showed that they're much more consistent at closing out maps, at getting victories. I mean, and you look at the map win-losses, 7-17 and 7-18. The Royal Ravens are 0-6 in series count. That's a dangerous position to be in, because you're always playing from behind. When you're Atlanta and Dallas, you're playing from ahead. And when you play a team, there is a psychological thing to it. You want to beat those teams because you're thinking, I mean, pro players call them the best teams in the game. They say that Atlanta is one of the best teams in the game. They say that Dallas is. They say that Chicago is. The Ravens and the Surge have a long way to go. I listened to Octane talk about it today. He did a State of the Union for the Seattle Surge. And
oh, man, I got to watch that.
It was good. He basically talked about how they lost. And he talked about why, because this was the most animated Octane that we've ever seen. After they lost their match, he was like frustrated and yelling in the camera. And he said it was because they didn't do what they did in scrims. And other pro players said that Seattle was scrimming really well. They were picking up maps against Dallas, and like they were doing good. Then they go to the major and don't play like they played. And that's a huge mistake when you don't, because it's still online. You're sitting in the same chair that you were playing scrims in. But this isn't LAN, so it's like, what's the disconnect? Like, what happened from scrims to now we're playing for real? And maybe the other teams just turned it up. I don't know. But with Seattle Surge being 0-6 in control, like, there's just a lot that has to happen for those two teams to leap themselves up to winning in the top. And so I'd say the best opportunities here are for Florida, Minnesota, the Gorillas, and I would even put Toronto in there because some of their losses just didn't make any sense. Like, they shouldn't have lost to the Thieves the way they did on Control with the 2v7 with Temp and Slasher. Like, that didn't...
That was crazy.
So, yeah, I think going into the groups, no matter how they land, the top 5 right now are the top 5. I think teams like Minnesota, Florida can jump into that where they belong. Make no mistake about it. I believe that Minnesota belongs up there. And what I'll say about Florida is I hope that Awakening is not the new Octane, where he is just going to come out and embarrass people in Search and Destroy and average like 13 kills. His first blood percentage, win percentage right now is like 86. So that means
that was insane.
If he gets in the first fight on a map in Search, he's winning it 86% of the time. Like, that's ridiculous. And so, but is he going to be the new Octane and Florida's just going to stay middle of the pack or down there in the bottom because the team can't figure out how to play around him and get it together? I hope not, but I think we're in for, no matter what, some awesome Call of Duty.
I think so too. I mean, you're looking at everything here, and just that was a great, like, I don't know, you call it a monologue, just a kingdom State of the Union, if you will. You look at the top 5 here, and like those teams, watching them battle it out, and even knowing like how close in contention we were. for the top 4, top 6. You know, we're top 7. Like that, those middle teams are gonna fight it out. Those top teams are gonna fight it out. Those bottom teams are gonna fight it out. And I'll say it again. We've been saying it the whole time. This is an extremely competitive league. I really do believe most teams can take a win off of most other teams any day. It kind of depends. And it, you know, it was weird. Like you saw New York, they looked really hot sometimes and then they looked cold. You're like, well, what happened? They were so good. And, you know, you're going to start to see that happen more and more as the game goes on. I think you're going to start to see teams start to pick it up. They're going to start to get it. Hopefully Rocker nails a hard point. And, you know, because even like the control game for Rocker was really good. So I think like we've not seen the best Rocker yet, obviously. I think they'll improve. But I'm just excited to see how the rest of this shakes out, because looking at it, I mean, it's crazy. I don't even like looking at the standings. I don't even know how we could do power rankings really, because this was an event where all of the teams were, and I feel like, you know, though I guess the only change I would make, now bear with me people, here are my power rankings. FaZe, Rocker, because Rocker beat Dallas, so there you go, we're second.
There you go, bam.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, looking at the standings here, like this looks like where it should be based on the performances, based on the teams. Do I think Rocker is better than 7th? Way better. But
I put him in
it
6th
depends
at
on
least.
the day.
That's hard to put them below the Gorillas. I know the Gorillas, but like IKON said earlier, after they won that first match that nobody expected them to win, they kind of then performed like everybody did expect them to perform. And they were close kind of with some of their maps versus FaZe. But I think still right now, if I'm a betting man, I don't bet on COD, but if I was a betting man, if I did pick'ems, and you put the Rocker versus the Gorillas right now, I'd pick the Rocker to win.
For sure. I mean, just look at the match and game counts. Shannon, put those on a screen real quick. If you look at 6th place, you got a match win of 3-5 for the Gorillas, 3-3 for Rocker. Game win 12-19 for the Gorillas, 12-11 for Rocker.
Yep.
It's just how the group shook out, man. It's just how it goes. It's all right. It's gonna be all right. We'll live to fight another day. Let's go. I'm getting hype already. I'm excited for next week. So yeah, I don't know, guys. Like for looking at the standings, the power rankings, like who do you think is completely in the wrong spot? Give me like one pick of a team. And it can't be Rocker because I already did that. I put them at number 2. So you guys can take a new one.
Team that's in the wrong spot. I'm not entirely sure, but what I will say, the team that I'm watching for is New York, because Hydra's on his way, and if we're going to a 3 SMG meta and you put him in there underneath the tutelage of Clay, I think that's a team that right now most people probably don't expect New York to be the 4th best team, but it could affect them greatly if you throw in a rookie like Hydra, who's supposed to be the real deal. I mean, he's supposed to be the guy. If he ends up like a Shotzzy caliber or an Abizi caliber, and now you throw him in with Clay, the other side of that is that DiamondCon looked really good with an AR in his hand, and now he can't have an AR in his hands because if there's only one, obviously that's going to Clay. So that's the team that I'm really the most intrigued by. I kind of see like Optic. I don't know how much will change. LA Thieves, I'm not sure how much will change. Minnesota, I don't think deserves to be at 7. I think that they should obviously be higher. But that's a team like, could New York be like the 2nd best team in the game, or could New York be like the 9th best team in the game? I could see them go so many different ways. So that's the one that I'm most intrigued by. And the one that I guess there's probably 2 that I think should be higher, and Minnesota should be higher, but also I started this year with Florida as my 4th best team, and just seeing them there at 8, like they're so talented. And I would put Skies and Awakening up against any main AR in Flex right now. So Minnesota and Florida just seem like they're out of place. But when you think about that, like Gorillas,
Skies has to be consistent.
Continue to stay that high. Yeah, I mean when Skies is on, there's nobody that's better.
I do have Skies in my fantasy lineup, so if he could be consistent, that would be amazing. Yeah, so, I think Florida's better than they were than they showed as well.
I don't want to say this out loud. I'm looking at New York and Chicago, man. That's a rough call. It's weird to say, but if New York doesn't get reverse swept by Dallas, would we have them like when they did not in the major, but during the stage, like, and would we have them in that 3 spot right now? It's so weird to think about that because that's just crazy. Like, FaZe, Dallas, and Chicago, if you think about it, that's Optic, Envy, and FaZe, the big 3, always at the top. You know, it always makes sense. But this New York team is kind of, they're chomping at their heels, like, and they're coming for them. Now, I'm scared for their changes. I'm like IKON. Like, what is the difference? If Hydra, he's already here. Zuma, when he was live, he was like, I'm trying to let Hydra into my apartment. Like, is he going to get on the roster, or are they going to be like, well, we've been very successful. Like, what do you do? But it's kind of like back in the day when Hex had an opportunity to put Damon on the roster. And everybody's like, oh, who's Optic going to pick up? You know, who's going to be their 4th? And he's like, why is this a question? I have Karma on my other roster on Optic Nation. Come on and get on the main roster.
I forgot about
that's
that.
Not even a question. And people were debating, should he put TP there? Like, who's he? And it was like, no, we have Damon, Karma, Barlow chilling, already in an Optic jersey. No question about it. So is Hydra that type of player where they're like, sorry, Asim, or, you know, like, it's been real. You've done a great job. You've been frying, but you're going to the bench, like, because we need Hydra. He did not come all the way across the world to America to do nothing and not play competitive Call of Duty. So that New York team, if they get better with Hydra and better with what did you call it? Metamania?
Metamania.
They could be in the top 3 of this league. And it's weird to think about, again, because Clayster will put it on the timeline as much as possible. But it is possible that these 2 teams, because the last time they played, yes, they 3-0'd each other. And if you look at the standings, aren't they tied for 3rd right now?
Yeah.
The 2 of them?
They are. They both have 80 CDL points.
It's going to be interesting.
So, yeah. It's going to be really interesting. I'm super excited. So if you guys are trying to catch up with where we were, we just wrapped up with the majors, the first stage majors. So we watched the home series. We watched Super Week, which was crazy. We watched the major tournament. Things didn't go super well for ROKKR, obviously placing 7th in the current standings after 1 stage. You don't love that, but I think we can bounce back if we just pick up our hardpoint game a bit. Search and Destroy is looking chef's kiss. Let's keep it up, boys. But yeah, so I'm excited to see how it goes. We'll have the group selection stages happening on the CDL channel, I believe, on Thursday. We'll upload some stuff on social and this YouTube channel, and we'll obviously be discussing it at length on the next rotation episode, which is every Tuesday night at 7:30 Central Standard Time. So I'm excited, guys. We only get 1 week break, and then we're right back into the action. It's not like last year where ROKKR plays like the first week of March and then the last week of March, and it's all random a little bit. It's like we are consistently in each of the stages. It's going to be crazy. Non-stop Call of Duty action all season. So I'm excited. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's good to be back for a full episode with you guys. My internet dipped out on me last week, so it's good to be back. And yeah, I'm excited for, I think it's the Toronto home series. We'll find out our group soon, and we'll fry from there, hopefully. Hopefully Metamania is good to us. We'll see. But anyways, thank you everyone so much for watching and listening. We'll catch you guys next time.